Okay, so let's look at this. First of all, let's determine whether it is a difference of means or if it's matched pairs. And they're talking about a sample of 50 people and their pulse rate. Now, do you see that you got person number one, and then they got their standing pulse rate, and then sitting pulse rate, and then they got person number two and theirs, and number three and theirs. All right, so the deal is, here's number 50. Now, do you agree with me that if I was to take this data right here and put it here, and then this guy moves here, and then this guy moves here, and this guy moves here, is it the same data? And if you answered no, then it's not a difference of means, because difference of mean order doesn't matter. Matched pair order does matter. So this data belongs together, this data belongs together, this data, and so on. So it's matched pairs. So A, B, and C is out. So now let's go through with it, because I got to know whether or not my AHA is not equal to or less than. And I think they say the difference, which of following test determined to see if there's a difference in mean pulse. So the difference, that means the answer is A. Okay, so let's look at number 12. And the deal is we have two different types of football players. So you have offense and defense. And they have the mean for each of these guys. So this would be 200. My minimum is at 150. And my max is at 250. And in here, I have 300 pounds. And then I go from 250 to 350. All right, and so do you see here they want to combine the information? So I still have a peak here at 200, and I have a peak here at 300, because that's my mean. I'm going to have a whole bunch of guys there. So this is going to be a bimodal, okay, because I got two peaks. Okay, so let's talk here about number 13. Remember that the standard deviation for proportions is P hat Q hat divided by N. And more importantly, that Q hat is going to be equal to 1 minus P hat. All right, so do you see that these two are the same thing? Because if P is close to 0, so that'd be 0.0001, then Q is going to be 1 minus 0.0001, right, divided by 1,000. Well, if this is A, then B is going to be 0.9999, which this is, and then this is going to be 0.001, right, divided by 1,000. A and B are the same thing. A and B are the same thing. So the answer is not A. Okay, so let's erase this. Okay, so now what do we have our choices at? And so what do we know here about N? Because the difference, main big difference between these is that we have N is 1,000 and N is 100. And so let's just explore this, all right? So if I have 1/2, that is 50%. If I have 1/3, I have 33%. And I have 1/4, I have 25%. And so what happens as the denominator gets bigger, my fraction gets smaller, okay? Or my percent gets smaller. Okay, and so it says, which of the following would produce the greatest? So do you see that if I want the biggest number, okay, in this case it'd be 50%, I need the small n. Okay, so then that means C is out. So now I'm just left with D and with E. Okay, so let's just go explore this, all right? So if D, for D, if I had 0.001 times 0.999 divided by 100, and you take the square root. And in here I'm going to have 1/2 times 1/2 divided by 100, and I take the square root. If you do the math, the one that is the biggest is this guy right here, so the answer is E. Okay, so let's go look here at number 14. They give this for a confidence interval, and I'm going to go back and do some math for that. Okay, so we could get information about the slope. We can get information about the correlation from the slope. The sum of the residual space, I don't even know what they're talking about there. And just because I know slope doesn't mean that my scatter plots are going to be linear. The dots are going to have a linear trend. So I'm left with A, D, and E. All right, so let's go find what it is. And remember that if I add up the endpoints, so 1.529, and if I add to that plus a negative 0.181, all right, so if I go do that, 1.529 minus 0.181, I get 1.348. Well, then I have to divide by 2. I have to get the midpoint, 0.674. That's my slope. My slope is 0.674. So it's not E, D, and it's not E. Well, let's look at A. So if my slope is positive, what do I know about my correlation? My correlation is positive, so the answer is A.